Hello and welcome. Tonight, we're sailing not into battle, but into bed. The sea is calm, the skies are low, and the wind outside your longhouse rustles the thatch just enough to remind you. Winter is here, and it's not planning on leaving anytime soon. You're not about to draw a sword or board a dragon-headed ship. No, your journey tonight is softer, quieter, but perhaps even more perilous. Because tonight, we're going to try something truly brave, falling asleep in the middle of a Viking winter. Now, before you get comfortable, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe if you like my content. Your support truly means a lot to me. Also, let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. I'm genuinely interested in knowing who is joining us from around the world. The Vikings gave us many things. Ships that cut through icy seas like blades, epic sagas that echoed through smoky halls, names like Leif, Ragnar, and that guy who probably didn't actually wear the horned helmet, no matter how many Halloween costumes suggest otherwise. They gave us myths, mead, and enough axes to worry your average archaeologist. But along with the adventure came something far less glamorous: the ordinary, excruciating, frostbitten daily life of the Norse people. And that, dear listener, is where things get very, very uncomfortable. Because for every bold voyage and saga-worthy conquest, there were hundreds of quiet, unnoticed lives grinding away in the cold. You know, the people who didn't raid Paris. They just tried to make soup without the goat escaping again. The ones who never swung a sword, but did a lot of laundry. The ones who didn't become legends, but somehow made legends possible. Farmers, herders, wives, children, elders, and unlucky thralls. All wrapped in wool, soaked in fish guts, and wondering if the gods could at least heat the soup this time. So let's leave the thrill-seekers to their pillaging. You and I, we're going somewhere colder and quieter, to the fjords and forests of the Norse world, to the longhouses and smoky hearths, to the salted cod, the aching backs, the prayers whispered through chattering teeth. We're going to walk, carefully and probably in wet socks, through the daily life of a Viking who didn't write any sagas because they were too busy trying not to freeze solid before sundown. Picture this. It's just before dawn in a scattered Norse village, nestled between jagged cliffs and a sea that smells like regret and rotten herring. Snow hugs the thatch roofs like a smug white blanket, daring anyone to try and go outside. The fjord is silent, except for the creaking of frozen wooden beams and the distant, deeply unmotivated bleating of a goat that is somehow already annoyed with you. Your neighbors are still asleep, or pretending to be, because getting up means facing the morning chores, and nobody wants that. The longhouse is still dark. The hearth fire, which you swore someone else was supposed to tend during the night, has nearly gone out. Smoke hangs in the air from yesterday's cooking, clinging to your clothes and hair with the persistence of an angry spirit. The air smells of ash, wool, and fish. Always fish. And somewhere in the corner, one of your cousins is snoring like a bear with a sinus infection. This is home. Or, as the gods might call it, the place where everyone complains, but nobody leaves. It's not glamorous, but it is life. A life spent surviving, day by day, season by season, mostly winter by winter. The Norse world wasn't built for ease. It was carved out of ice and rock and stubbornness. The people here didn't just endure the elements, they argued with them, loudly, sometimes with axes, sometimes with sacrifices, but mostly with the kind of grim patience that comes from knowing that, yes, you're going to have to eat salted fish again. The culture, of course, was rich. It had laws and art and deeply detailed stories involving giants, wolves, and world-ending snakes. But it also had realities that were far less dramatic and far more annoying, like waking up on a mattress stuffed with straw and regrets, like trying to keep your toes from falling off during morning chores, like hoping today's stew doesn't taste quite so much like boiled moss. Religion was present too. Always. The gods were never far from mind. Odin watched. Thor thundered. Freya wept. Loki did whatever Loki wanted, and nobody liked that. People offered sacrifices and prayers, carved runes, and paid close attention to dreams, just in case some frost giant was trying to send a message. But even the gods couldn't help you find your missing sock. That was just life. Trade, raiding, crafting, and farming all shaped this world. But for most people, especially during the long winter months, it came down to one goal. Don't die yet. Keep the animals alive, keep the children fed, and keep the roof from collapsing under the weight of snow and poorly planned repairs. Not exactly heroic, but profoundly human. So tonight, as you settle into the warmth of your modern bed, with your mattress that isn't full of straw, your home that doesn't leak, and your dinner that didn't involve drying anything over a smoky pit, let's drift together into something far less comfortable. Let's not raid. Let's rise. Rise as someone who didn't get to write history, but carried it. A Viking not of the saga, but of the everyday. We're waking up now. Your breath fogs in the frozen air. The dog is sleeping on your foot. And outside, the wind hums through the trees, singing a lullaby written in frost and firewood. The sun is barely stirring, but we must. The chores await. The goats are already plotting. And you, dear sleeper, are about to discover just how much discomfort it takes to keep a legend warm. So close your eyes and get comfortable, because the Viking day is beginning, and it's going to be very, very cold. Let's begin. Morning comes reluctantly in a Viking winter, dragging itself across the sky like an old ox through mud. There's no sunrise in the dramatic sense, no golden rays slicing across the mountains, no birdsong fluttering into your ears. Just a gradual brightening of the grey outside, barely distinguishable from the darkness it replaces. And inside your longhouse, things aren't much better. You wake up in a smoky, splintered box of a room that might be called home if one were being generous, or deeply sarcastic. The fire, once again, has burned down to embers, despite last night's promise from someone, probably the same person who burned the soup, that they'd tend it through the night. So, the warmth has mostly left, except for a suspiciously warm patch of floor where the dog is still sleeping, oblivious to your suffering. Your breath puffs visibly into the air, small ghostly clouds rising from your lips with each miserable exhale. You're lying under a fur. It smells like wet goat and ambition. It's heavy, itchy, and about as effective as a holy blanket made of wet moss. There's a draft creeping in from every direction, from the cracks in the walls, from the broken shutter someone swore they'd fix last harvest, and possibly from the ceiling, which you suspect has begun a slow campaign of collapse. The fur isn't quite large enough, and your toes, which you forgot you had until they reminded you with an aggressive iciness, are sticking out into the frozen air like hostages of the morning. You'd like to stay where you are, which is to say motionless and covered. But the laws of Norse winter survival say otherwise. Chores await. Always. The kind of chores that don't respect excuses, or dignity, or numb fingers. And so you groan, softly, to avoid waking someone who might ask you to do even more, and begin the process of disentangling yourself from the shared bedding arrangement, which, depending on the night, may include one cousin, half a goat, and someone's bare foot that does not belong to you. There's no privacy. That concept doesn't really exist here. The longhouse is one room, with everyone in it. Multiple generations, 2 goats, a perpetually grumpy dog, and possibly a traveller who didn't leave when he was supposed to. You don't get your own space, you get your own corner, if you're lucky. And that corner may also be used to store cheese. It's not great, but it's warm. Sort of. You sit up, and instantly your spine reminds you that the bedding was essentially hay covered in regret. Every joint pops, and your neck clicks ominously, as if it's considering going on strike. You reach for your tunic, which is somehow both damp and stiff, a true feat of Norse engineering, and begin the noble, awkward struggle of getting dressed without fully removing the fur because it's just that cold. You win eventually, though the tunic wins some points by making you itch in 3 new places. Breakfast is waiting, which sounds promising, until you realize that waiting is a strong word. There's a bowl. Inside it, some sour porridge made from barley and bad ideas, congealed to the sides like a cautionary tale. If you're lucky, someone reheated it. If not, you're essentially eating history. There's also stale bread, which is not so much bread as a weaponized biscuit. You gnaw on it slowly, wondering whether chewing this hard counts as exercise. There might be dried fish, emphasis on might, If there is, it will be aggressively salty, astonishingly chewy, and smell like a boot that died at sea. It's hard to say whether the fish is supposed to be food or punishment. But either way, it's what you're having. To drink? Thin ale, because the water's not always safe, and also because it's hard to feel feelings when your entire face is frozen. The ale is barely alcoholic and even less satisfying, but it's better than melted snow, which often includes bonus twigs and the occasional insect. You sip it slowly, trying not to gag on the taste of despair. There is, of course, no coffee. Not even something pretending to be coffee. There's no tea, no milk unless the goats are feeling cooperative, and certainly no sugar. Sugar is a fantasy known only to distant lands and questionable trade routes. Here, your sweetener is hope, and maybe a bit of dried berry if someone didn't eat them all during the last feast. As you eat, the longhouse begins to stir. Children cry. One of them has clearly stepped in something unpleasant. An elder coughs like a dying moose and mutters about the gods being displeased. Someone knocks over a wooden cup. A dog sniffs a goat with questionable intentions. It's a symphony of morning chaos. One that somehow happens every day with increasing noise and decreasing charm. There's no brushing your teeth. That's not a thing. Maybe you chew a stick. Maybe you rinse with a bit of ale. Or maybe you just accept that your breath is now a weapon. There's also no bathroom, in the traditional sense, just a designated spot outside, past the chickens, where you hope the snow is soft and the wind is merciful. There are no socks. If your feet are warm, it's because the dog is sleeping on them again, and he's not moving. Someone somewhere is already shouting, probably about firewood, or the lack of it, or who forgot to bring it in last night. Spoiler, it was probably you, but you're not about to admit that with the entire longhouse listening. So you stare into your porridge, pretending to be deeply contemplative like a poet or a very tired god. Outside, the frost on the window shutter is starting to melt just enough to remind you that the world beyond this smoky hall is even worse than what's inside it, and that soon you'll have to face it. There's water to break, animals to check, snow to shovel, and complaints to be made, loudly and with feeling, but not just yet. For now, you sit there, in your itchy tunic, with your frozen toes, chewing something that might be fish or might be a lesson in humility. And you breathe, each exhale fogging into the air, mixing with the smoke and the smell, and the low grumble of Norse life slowly dragging itself out of sleep and into suffering. And the day hasn't even begun. Life in a Viking longhouse is best described as communal, in the way that being stuck in a barrel with 14 people and 2 goats might be considered communal. If you're imagining cozy hearth fires, rustic, wooden beams and some bearded man playing a harp in the corner while everyone sips hot mead, congratulations, you're thinking of a fantasy novel. Here in reality, or rather Viking reality, the longhouse is less a haven of warmth and kinship, and more of a smoky, creaky, ongoing test of patience and respiratory endurance. Let's take a step inside. The first thing you notice is the air, or rather, the lack of it. The longhouse has a hearth in the center, meant to provide heat and light, and a place to cook the day's sorry excuse for food. It's noble in theory. In practice, the smoke rises lazily, as if also too cold to move quickly, and then decides to just linger. There's a hole in the roof that's supposed to let it out, but it's doing more of a symbolic job than a functional one. As a result, the entire space smells like damp socks, burned cabbage, and the slow smolder of 1,000 unspoken arguments. The light is dim, filtered through smoke and the occasional shaft of winter grey that slips in from a gap in the roof or a poorly tied wall plank. It's never truly bright in here, just various shades of gloom. The fire flickers and pops, casting shadows that make everyone look a little bit haunted and slightly accusatory. And everyone is here. The whole family, all of them, all the time. No one gets their own room. You don't have a bedroom. You have a designated sleep space, usually marked by a few of your personal items. A knife, maybe a carved comb, and a blanket that has definitely seen better centuries. Privacy is not a thing. If someone is snoring, you all hear it. If someone is having an argument, you're part of it, whether you like it or not. If someone is having gas, well, the longhouse is a closed system. You all share everything. There are livestock too, because of course there are. Chickens, goats, maybe even a prized cow if you're one of the wealthier types. They don't have their own barn. They have a corner. That corner is also where the children tend to play. The shoes are stored, and someone once tried to keep fermented fish in a jar for reasons still unclear. The goat doesn't respect boundaries. It will chew anything, including your cloak, including your patience. The longhouse is made of timber and turf, which sounds sturdy until it rains, which it often does. And then the roof begins a slow, apologetic drip. Buckets are placed underneath to catch the leaks, except when you forget. Then someone wakes up with damp hair and a new reason to grumble. Repairs are constant. Something is always coming loose, falling apart, or breaking in a loud and inconvenient way. One of the wall beams creaks with every wind gust, and there's an ongoing debate about whether it's charming or deeply ominous. The ladder to the sleeping loft is missing a rung, which is how your cousin twisted his ankle last month. A story you now hear retold at least twice a week, with increasing exaggeration and fewer facts. Cooking happens right next to where people sleep. The stew pot is eternal, constantly bubbling, never fully cleaned, and always tasting vaguely of onions, regret, and whatever was left over from last week. Everyone takes turns stirring it. No one takes responsibility for it. Occasionally, someone tries to improve it by adding herbs. They are usually ignored. Bread is baked flat, dry, and usually dropped on the floor at least once before eating. As for social life, well, it's lively. You sit on benches or low stools, wrapped in your furs, sharing stories, complaints, and flatbread. Conversations repeat. Someone talks about the weather, even though you're all inside. Someone else starts yet another story about a fox they saw that might have been a spirit. Your aunt asks again where the good comb went. Nobody knows. Everybody suspects someone else. When the local seer visits, things get especially awkward. The seer doesn't speak much, just stares into the fire and mutters in riddles. Everyone acts solemn. You try not to giggle when she warns that the rooster's path shall be crossed by the wind of a forgotten promise. Someone always nods knowingly, as if this makes complete sense. It doesn't. But no one wants to be the one to ask questions. Snoring is a group activity. It comes in waves. The uncle in the corner can produce sounds that resemble distant thunder. Someone else wheezes rhythmically. Occasionally, the goat snores too. You learn to sleep through it, or you don't. In which case, you stare at the ceiling, counting smoke curls and questioning every life decision that led you to this moment. And through it all, the fire crackles. Children run and fall. The dog steals a piece of dried fish. Someone starts singing. A low, off-key chant that somehow turns into a communal hum. It's not beautiful, exactly, but it's familiar. A soundtrack of resilience, of shared struggle, of people crammed into a house too small, too smoky, too noisy, and yet somehow still standing. So you wrap your cloak tighter, blink away the sting of smoke, and take a sip of tepid ale that tastes like old shoes and barley. And you think, this is home. Loud, smoky, mildly hazardous, but home. And no matter how bad the stew is, or how cold the floor gets, you're all in it together. Because in the Viking world, the longhouse isn't just a building. It's a lifestyle, a constant lesson in cooperation, endurance, and pretending not to notice when someone farts during a ritual. And really, what more could one ask for in a winter wonderland? Now, the fire is still flickering. The dog has curled up by the hearth, and even the goat has gone quiet. So breathe in the smoke. Feel the creak of the beams, and let the longhouse settle back into the hum of ordinary chaos, until the next chore pulls you back into the cold. So, you've made it through the charming chaos of the longhouse and stepped outside into the glorious majesty of a Viking winter morning. Or, well, what passes for morning. The sun isn't exactly up. It's sort of leaning against the horizon, barely lifting its head, already tired, already fading. It offers no warmth, no enthusiasm. Just a brief, apologetic smear of orange before slinking back into darkness. Welcome to your 4 hours of daylight. Enjoy them. They'll be gone before you finish your first task. And speaking of tasks, it's time to get to work. Because unlike modern life, where winter is a season for blankets and indoor hobbies, and complaining about the Wi-Fi, a Viking winter doesn't care how cold you are. Survival, here, is not a concept. It's a full-time job. And unfortunately, you're working overtime, without pay. And the HR department is a very angry cow. First on the agenda, wood. Always wood. Firewood is the currency of warmth, the backbone of survival, and the #1 cause of back pain in Viking society. You need it constantly. For heat, for cooking, for drying out the boots that absolutely did not keep your feet dry. So you grab your dull, slightly warped axe. The good one was borrowed by your cousin 3 weeks ago and never returned. And you head for the woodpile. If you're lucky, it hasn't been completely buried under snow. If you're not, well, time to dig. Splitting wood in a Viking winter is not a noble cinematic task with flying splinters and strong-armed heroism. It is cold. It is tedious. It is miserable. The axe handle numbs your hands before you even swing it. Your breath fogs the air in front of you like a warning. The logs are frozen solid, resistant to your efforts, like they too would rather not be here. You swing. You miss. You swing again. Your arms ache. Your nose drips. One log splits, and you feel a brief moment of triumph, followed immediately by the realization that you need about 50 more just like it. Next up, water. You need some. The goats need some. The people pretending not to hear you groaning about needing water also need some. So you grab a bucket, the leaky one, naturally, and trudge toward the stream. It's not far, just past the storage shed, over the slippery path that curves slightly downhill, where you definitely fell last week and bruised something important. The stream is not a babbling brook of refreshment. It is frozen over, crusted with a thick sheet of ice that crunches ominously underfoot. You kneel down, painfully, because your knees have been arguing with the cold since sunrise, and chip away at the ice with a stick or a rock or your willpower. Eventually you break through. You dip the bucket. Your fingers brush the water. Instant regret. It's not even cold. It's angry. It bites. You wonder, not for the first time, if frostbite is just a legend. You slosh the water back, slip, bunce, catch yourself, and do a tiny victory dance that no one sees. Now it's time for animal care, which sounds pastoral until you meet the animals. The goats are irritable. The cow is gassy. The chickens are conspiring. And none of them want to be out here. Neither do you, but someone has to muck the stalls, spread the hay, and check the lopsided fence for new gaps. You grumble. The goat grumbles back. It's a conversation of equals. You scrape frozen dung from the ground with a stick that used to be a spear. You try not to slip. You fail. Your boot comes off in the mud. The pig laughs, or snorts. It sounds suspiciously like judgment. You retrieve the boot, now filled with things you don't want to discuss, and push on. The cow needs brushing. It doesn't help with milk production. It just keeps her from looking at you with that passive-aggressive glare that says, "I remember what happened last solstice. Feed me first next time." The sheep, if you have any, are huddled together in an act of group defiance, refusing to move or acknowledge your efforts. You throw some hay at them and call it even. Meanwhile, back at the longhouse, someone is patching the roof. Or rather, pretending to patch it, while mostly just shouting about how hard it is to climb on thatched turf in the wind. You hear muttered curses, the thud of a hammer, the occasional squeal as a tool slides off the edge and vanishes into a snowdrift. Repairs are never-ending. If it's not the roof, it's the wall. If it's not the wall, it's the door. If it's not the door, it's the smoke hole, which has decided today is a good day to collapse inwards and shower the stew with ash. All this, and it's still technically morning. You take a break, not because you're allowed, but because your body forces you. You lean against the wall of the goat pen. It smells like defeat. You stare at the sky, which is now a uniform shade of dull grey. It's hard to tell if it's still rising or already setting. The sun, at this point, seems more like a rumour than a fact. The wind bites. Your hands are cracked. Your breath comes out in heavy clouds. And yet, somehow, you're still here. Someone calls you to help haul wood, or saltfish, or stir the stew. It doesn't matter what it is. It's all the same endless cycle. Work, freeze, grumble, repeat. This is winter in the Norse world. It doesn't ask for your permission. It doesn't care about your opinion. It simply exists. Heavy, relentless, bitter, beautiful if you squint, but mostly brutal. And there's no sick day. No, I'll do it later. Later is for the dead. Now is for chopping, fetching, hauling, scraping, surviving. And yet somehow people did this every day for years. They built lives from this cold, hard repetition. They sang songs. They carved wood. They told tales of gods and monsters and long-forgotten summers. They found meaning in a world that offered them almost nothing but frostbite and fermented fish. You wouldn't last a week, but they did. And now, as the brief daylight begins to fade, barely 5 hours after it began, you trudge back to the longhouse. The chores aren't done. They never are. But you've made it through another morning in a Viking winter, another round in the great frozen ring of survival. So kick the snow off your boots, let your fingers thaw by the fire, and prepare yourself, because tomorrow will look exactly the same. Unless, of course, you're lucky, and it snows so hard the goats block the door. Then maybe, just maybe, you get an extra hour of sleep. So you've survived the morning, just barely. Your feet are thawing, your knuckles are bruised, and your reward for all that effort is food. Or at least, something that technically qualifies as food. Because in Viking life, mealtime isn't about flavor. It's about function. Survival first, taste very much last. Let's begin with the smell. Imagine, if you will, a long wooden table in a smoky hall. The smoke never leaves, of course. It clings to everything. Your hair, your clothes, your soul. You sit cross-legged on a low bench, trying not to bump, knees with your cousin who hasn't washed since Thor was in short trousers. You're starving, yes, but also bracing, because whatever they're ladling into that bowl smells like it's been alive longer than some of the livestock. That's not an insult. That's just dinner. Now, if it's a decent day, and the gods aren't punishing your village with a shipment of spoiled seal meat, you might get something relatively fresh. Dried cod, perhaps. It's been hanging in the wind for weeks, months even, stiff as a sword and roughly as edible. You don't chew it so much as wrestle it. Some soak it in water to soften it. Most don't bother. You gnaw, you wince. You hope the splinter in your gum isn't permanent. If fish isn't on the menu, maybe you're in for some smoked lamb. That's the good stuff. Rubbed with salt, dried above a fire, stored with care. It still tastes like ash and regret, but in a festive kind of way. On special occasions, they might throw it into a stew with turnips. Not because turnips are delicious and they're not, but because they grow like weeds and don't require sunlight or joy. Then there's the bread. Ah, Viking bread. Less a culinary creation and more of a building material. Made from coarse ground grain, baked flat and hard, often mixed with bark, sand, or whatever else was lying around. It's brown. It's dense. It's emotionally heavy. It's the kind of bread that doesn't go stale because it already is. You knock it on the table and listen to it echo. Then you try to eat it, using more jaw strength than you used to chop firewood. Drinks? Ale, of course. Everyone drinks ale. Children, elders, warriors, your neighbor's dog if it's clever enough. But don't imagine something golden and frothy. Viking ale is temperamental, brewed in wooden tubs, often flavored unintentionally by mold, bugs, or thyme. It might be sharp, sour, or just quietly upsetting. Occasionally, it ferments too long and becomes vinegar. You drink it anyway, because what else are you going to do? Water from the stream tastes like goat feet, and milk has to be saved for the animals that scream the loudest. Now, if you're truly lucky, or very unlucky depending on your relationship with your gag reflex, you might be served the most feared delicacy of the North, fermented shark meat. It begins, as most horror stories do, with a dead Greenland shark. You can't eat it fresh. It's poisonous. So to fix that, you bury it in the ground for weeks or longer. It ferments. It oozes. It transforms into something that smells like cleaning fluid and sorrow. Then they dig it up, cut it into cubes, and say, enjoy, and somehow they do. Even more remarkably, it's considered an honor to be served this dish, which means you have to smile and pretend not to notice that it's trying to escape your mouth. You chew, slowly, very slowly, and pray to Odin that it doesn't come back up. Meals in a Viking household are noisy affairs. The hall echoes with slurps, grunts, arguments over turnip portions, and the persistent whine of dogs that are absolutely convinced they deserve the meat more than you. And to be honest, they're not wrong. Hierarchy shows up even here. Guests eat first. Important men get the choicest bits, like the marrow or the half-burnt goat foot. Children snatch what they can. Women serve unless they're of high status. Everyone else just waits and hopes. If you're late, you're lucky to get the pot scrapings, which may or may not still be edible depending on how much ash fell into it. You eat with a knife, mostly. There are no forks. Those are centuries away and sound far too fancy for this crowd. Your hands do the rest. The bread doubles as a plate, sometimes as a spoon, occasionally as an emotional support item. Splinters are common. So is grit. You chew through it. If your tooth cracks, well, that's tomorrow's problem. Despite the sensory assault, there's a strange comfort in Viking meals. A sense of routine. The fire crackles. Someone mumbles a blessing. The old man near the hearth tells the same story he told yesterday about the time he wrestled a reindeer. No one believes him, but no one interrupts either. A child spills porridge. A woman scolds him. The dog eats it anyway. Life continues. After the meal, someone plays a stringed instrument made of bones and string and luck. Someone else starts a low chant about Odin's ravens. The smoke gets thicker. The stew pot boils down to sludge. And people slowly begin to settle. Bellies. Not full, but not empty either. In this world, that's considered success. So yes, Viking food is not glamorous. It's not plated with herbs or served with wine pairings. It is functional, grim, and deeply committed to making you appreciate modern refrigeration. But it kept them alive. Day after frozen day. Meal after chewy, sour, questionable meal. You wouldn't call it a feast, but you also wouldn't forget it. And now, as the last crust is chewed and the dogs retreat to their corners, the longhouse grows quieter. The fire still crackles. The smell of fish lingers. Someone farts. No one reacts. This is nourishment, Viking style. And you survived dinner. Barely. So you've made it through breakfast, a heroic act in itself. And now it's time to begin what the Norse call a regular workday. Not that there's anything particularly regular about surviving in the frozen fringe of the world, with nothing but wool, bone, and a generous helping of stubbornness. You're not a raider, or a jarl, of course. You're a villager. And if you're not tilling the rocky soil, then you're crafting something with half-frozen fingers, or hauling your body through a snowstorm to barter a cod for something equally miserable. Let's start with the crafts. Crafting, in the Viking world, was not a leisure activity. No one sat beside the hearth thinking, maybe I'll carve a runestone for fun. If you were carving something, it was a fishhook, because the last one snapped off inside a trout the size of a loaf. Or you're making rope, which sounds simple until you realize you're twisting animal hair and fibers together with stiff fingers that forgot what warmth feels like sometime in October. Rope making is done slowly, carefully, and usually while muttering about frostbite. The fibers are soaked, spun, twisted, and often smell like a goat got involved, because they probably did. Rope is important though. Without it, nothing gets tied down. Not sails, not bundles, not the sled that will haul your firewood, fish, and the occasional drunk cousin back to the longhouse. If you're handy with knives, not in a raiding kind of way, but a domestic kind of way, you might carve tools or utensils from bone and antler. It's delicate work. Your hands shake from the cold, and your breath fogs the air as you try not to shave off a fingertip. There's a special kind of joy in making a spoon that doesn't splinter. And there's a deep kind of grief when someone uses it to stir turnip stew and breaks it in half. Then there's tanning hides. Ah yes, the glamorous, fragrant art of transforming raw animal skins into wearable leather. If you're new to this, picture the smell of feet. Now multiply it by 10. Add a hint of rotting meat and splash in some ammonia from fermented urine. That's hide tanning. It's essential, of course. You need boots, cloaks, bags. But the smell? The smell stays with you. In your clothes, in your beard, in your dreams. If a Norse ghost ever visits you, you'll know it's real by the scent of half-cured seal fur. But perhaps you're one of the lucky few whose job involves trade. Bartering is how you get what you don't have, like salt or metal or a better mood. This means you're traveling. Not in a gentle carriage, of course. You're dragging a sled packed with cod, fish oil, carved trinkets, or surplus turnips across snow and ice to a neighboring settlement that probably smells worse than yours. Travel in a Viking winter is not for the faint of heart or soft of foot. The roads, if you can call them that, are uneven, icy, and often disappear entirely under snow. Your sled creaks, your boots leak, and every gust of wind feels like it's whispering, "You made a mistake." Still, the exchange is important. You trade a sealskin pouch for a chunk of iron. You swap dried berries for a carved comb. You hope the trader doesn't lie, but he probably does. There's no Yelp in the Viking world, only rumors and revenge. And before you get too confident in your negotiations, don't forget the spirits. Yes, the Norse believed their landscape was full of them. Landwights, trolls, ancestors peeking from the trees. Before any journey or trade, it was wise to bribe them. A splash of ale on the ground, a quiet whisper to the rocks, a bit of food left at a standing stone. It's not superstition, it's insurance. Back home, your chores continue. Maybe you're fixing a fence that broke under the weight of snow, again. Or you're rethatching part of the roof that's begun to sag, again. Every task takes longer when your hammer's frozen to your hand. Every chore is a conversation with frostbite. And everything breaks just a little faster when it's buried in snow for half the year. Your feet have gone from cold to numb to no longer part of the team. Your fingers crack at the joints. Your face is red, not from embarrassment, but from being slapped repeatedly by an Arctic breeze with something to prove. You blink through ice crystals, swat at imaginary snow fleas, and try to remember what summer used to feel like. You can't. That's okay. It might not come back anyway. And then, the snowstorm hits. It doesn't announce itself politely. One moment, the sky is just sulking. The next, it's furious. Wind howls. Snow whips sideways. Your sled tips. The dog howls. You can't see your hand in front of your face. Navigation becomes a matter of guessing, praying, and promising to never mock the seer again. You stagger back toward the longhouse, clutching your wool cloak like a lifeline. The snow piles up quickly, the world turning white and indifferent. Your boots crunch, your breath rasps, and somewhere, someone is already at the hearth complaining that you tracked in slush again. You made it. You're home. You've traded, crafted, hauled, and survived, for now. This is the Viking daily grind. There is no office, no coffee, no lunch break, just rope that needs twisting, fish that need drying, and 100 tiny decisions between survival and surrender. And yet, people did it. Over and over, year after year, they built a world with calloused hands and endless patience. And now, as the snowstorm settles and your skin thaws by the fire, you begin to doze. The dog curls near your feet. The seer mutters about omens. Someone passes around bread like stone. But your mind drifts beyond the blizzard, past the chores, and into dreams. It's spring now, or rather, what the Norse generously called spring. The snow has thinned from bone-cracking drifts to mud-splattered ice. The birds have begun squawking again, though half of them sound like they're regretting it already. The livestock are equally confused, standing in patches of half-frozen slush, wondering if they should eat it, lie in it, or just glare at the sun until it goes away. And with this thaw comes something you've been dreading for weeks: raiding season. Ah yes, the myth, the legend, the Hollywood highlight reel of blood and bronze, the longships slicing across northern waters, the axes raised, the monasteries trembling, the plunder, the glory, the songs. But not for you. You are not the brave warrior standing tall on a dragon-headed prow with wind in your beard and fate in your knuckles. You are not charging ashore screaming Odin's name with an axe in one hand and someone else's lunch in the other. You are the one who stays behind. Someone has to, after all. Someone has to milk the goats, patch the thatch, feed the children, bury the chickens, and worry. Because the men are leaving. Your brother, your uncle, the guy who owes you 2 loaves and a bone needle. They're suiting up, strapping on cloaks, gripping their spears and muttering about destiny. They leave with excitement painted across their faces. You mostly feel dread. When a Viking longship sails out of the fjord, it's not just a boat gliding over water. It's a gamble, a spinning coin made of blood and weather. Some ships return bursting with silver and stories. Others return with half the crew, missing limbs, or not at all. The ones who stay behind, like you, get the stories first. And stories, oh, they pour in long before the sailors do. Tales drift in from traders, travelling bards, and that one neighbour who definitely wasn't there, but has strong opinions about everything. The stories are always about victory, of course. Always about how many heads rolled and how many gold cups were liberated from rude monks. They speak of fire and frenzy, of gods smiling and enemies weeping. No one mentions the frostbite. You hear whispers, though, in the corners of the longhouse, behind the barn, in the low murmurs of those who've seen too much. They tell a fuller tale. They tell of vomiting over the side of the ship for 3 weeks straight, of rats gnawing through supply sacks, of sour beer, bad bread, and even worse weather, of landing ashore only to find the monastery already looted by the Danes, or worse, abandoned entirely, save for one very unimpressed goat. And of course, there's always the possibility that someone gets left behind, maybe in a scuffle, maybe on purpose, maybe because they got too loud about wanting a bigger share. And when the boat sails home without them, no one speaks their name, not out of grief, just awkward silence. But back in your village, life goes on. You keep the hearth warm, you mend things, you chase toddlers, you hope the cows don't give up again, and you quietly start putting away a few items just in case things go badly. The good knife, a little salt, that comb you only use for feast days, not because you expect a raid, but because you know the world doesn't ask what you expect. If another clan comes through while your best defenders are away, it's not going to matter how politely you explain that you're not interested in being raided today. Thank you very much. Violence is an open invitation in the Viking Age, and your locks are made of hope, so sometimes you hide the good spoons. Not the copper ones, no. Those are too obvious. The wooden ones you carved from driftwood last spring. The ones with the knotwork you're oddly proud of. You slip them into a hole in the wall behind. The bench and place a fur over them like a secret. It's not much, but it's yours. As the days pass, you keep an eye on the sea. You pretend you're just watching the waves or the gulls or that suspiciously shaped cloud. But really, you're watching for sails. You're hoping for the familiar curve of your people's boat, the crest on the prow, the sound of singing, and fearing silence. When, or if, they return, the mood is strange. You run down to the shore with the others, smiling, waving, trying not to count how many came back, trying not to wonder why one person isn't on the deck, trying not to notice the blood that doesn't look dry yet. There is cheering, of course. There are boasts, weapons raised, chests puffed, tales retold before they're even done happening. But you notice the little things. The man who limps off the ship with no explanation. The way one of them winces when hugged. The quiet nods between survivors. And the sack of silver that looks smaller than last year's. The glory fades quickly. The wounds take longer. Soon the returned raiders are washing off in the cold stream, or sitting by the fire, too tired to speak, or already asking when the next raid will be. Because this is what life is now. A cycle of leaving, hoping, and returning. Or not. And you're still here. You didn't swing an axe or see a monastery. You didn't chant to Odin under stormy skies. But you kept the fire lit. You fed the goats. You stitched the cloaks. You remembered the names. And deep down, you know something the sagas never say. Glory is loud. Survival is quieter. The raiders get remembered in songs, but someone still had to salt the fish. Someone still had to keep the village from freezing. Someone still had to patch the roof during the thunderstorm that flattened half the sheep pens. You stayed behind, and maybe, just maybe, that took more strength. The raiders have returned. Their sagas are being muttered beside the hearth, and for now, the village breathes a little easier. The longhouse creaks with renewed noise, tales, laughter, snoring, and you settle back into the rhythm of surviving another week of not being plundered. But survival in the Viking Age isn't just about swords and storms. It's also about something more personal, something closer, something it's hard to put into words without wrinkling your nose. Let's talk about your clothes. Now, if you're imagining furs trimmed in silver, intricate knotwork, and cloaks that billow dramatically in the wind like you're a saga hero just waiting for a soundtrack, stop. Your daily outfit is less fearsome Viking warrior and more particularly damp sheep. Layers. That's the secret. Not matching layers, not clean layers, just layers. Wool on wool. A tunic that's been patched so many times it has more memories than fabric. A cloak that smells like rain and disappointment. Trousers that itch in all the wrong places. If you're lucky, they fit. If you're not, you tie them until they sort of stay up and hope the goats aren't in a mocking mood. Your boots, thick leather, if you can afford it. Otherwise, stitched hide wrapped in a way that technically covers your feet. Waterproof is an aspirational term. You step into snow, it melts. You step into slush, it laughs. By midday, your toes are having private thoughts about frostbite. By evening, they've stopped filing complaints and started giving up. And socks. Woolen tubes of sorrow, forever damp and slightly crunchy. You dry them near the fire, but they never quite recover. They smell like old porridge and feel like betrayal. As for fashion, it's simple. If it keeps you from dying, it's in. If it looks good but doesn't block wind, it's stored away for the feast days. And even then, that fancy belt you've got, you only wear it if no one's likely to fall in the stream and need rescuing, because jumping in with decorative bronze fastenings is a recipe for hypothermia and sarcasm from the elders. Now let's shift a little closer, into the realm of hygiene, which is, in a word, optional. Bathing is rare, not non-existent, just special, like eclipses, or that moment when your boots actually dry all the way through. There are hot springs in some places, and if you live near one, congratulations. You're probably the cleanest person within 5 fjords. But for most, washing is done in cold water, outside, and usually only under duress. That duress might be a wedding, a major holiday, or your grandmother threatening to chase you into the sea with a switch. Soap exists. Yes, sort of. It's made from ash and lye, which technically gets the dirt off but might also take your top layer of skin with it. After a vigorous scrub, your skin feels cleaner. Also, slightly burned. The gods demand sacrifice after all. Hair is another adventure. Most Norse people took pride in their hair and beards, and combs were common, carved from bone, decorated with runes, often shared in families. But combing only helps so much when your hair is full of soot, sweat, and the vague memory of fermented fish from breakfast. And body odor. It's not impolite. It's the natural perfume of the age. You smell like everyone else. Wood smoke, wool grease, onions, wet animal, and adventure. But come spring, when the world begins to thaw and all those smells are released from winter's icebox, that's when even the gods might turn their heads. Still, cleanliness wasn't just about comfort. There were rituals. Cleanliness before a sacrifice. Washing before certain meals. Preparing for Yule or other feast days often involved a symbolic cleanse. Washing the body in freezing water to prepare the soul. It wasn't about germs. Germs hadn't been invented yet. It was about purity, readiness, and not offending the spirits, or the guests. Clothes would be scrubbed, often with urine, a cheap and efficient cleanser, and no, I won't elaborate. Hands would be rinsed in bowls before meals, hair would be combed, jewelry polished. Even the roughest villager might have a bronze ring tucked away, saved for these rare occasions when appearances mattered. Because feast days weren't just about food. They were about pretending briefly that life didn't smell like mildew and goat. And then, the feast would end. The guests would leave. The fire would die down. And you'd take off your nice tunic, the one without holes, and hang it in the rafters to keep it safe from mice. You'd put your work clothes back on, still damp, still familiar, and you'd return to the routine. Cold mornings, itchy shoulders, smoke in your hair and dirt between your toes. And through it all, a quiet pride. Because no one's clean in winter. Not really. The snow might be white, but life under it is anything but. Still, the days are slowly growing longer now. The light clings a bit later to the horizon. The ice is thinning in spots. You can hear water again, running, dripping, promising something warmer, if not entirely cleaner. Soon, the fjord will thaw, and your cousin will claim he's going raiding again, even though he still hasn't paid back the cloak he borrowed last time. Soon, the stream will flow freely again, and the elders will insist on a proper washing ceremony, though you know half the village will dodge it. Soon, the wind will change, and with it, your routines. But tonight, you're wrapped in wool. Scratchy, sure, but warm enough. The longhouse settles around you, flickering with firelight. Somewhere nearby, someone coughs. A goat bleats softly in its sleep, and a child whispers a prayer to Thor, asking for fewer chores tomorrow. No promises, but you pull your cloak tighter, and as the smoke dances in the beams above, you feel the quiet thrum of a world that never stops moving. One layer of wool, and one faintly ceremonial bath at a time. And in the morning, well, let's just say there's more work waiting. But for now, let's not worry about the smell. Not when spring's still weeks away. Instead, let's follow the thread of warmth a little further. There's more to come. More wood to chop. More rituals to prepare. More myths to half believe. Because even in the cold, even in the crustiest socks and the longest winters, the Norse kept going. And so will you. Now, let's suppose you've made it through another grey-skied day without falling in a frozen stream, burning your hand on the hearth, or eating something your stomach will later hold a grudge over. Good job. Unfortunately, your neighbour's goat is missing. Someone's ox cart rolled into someone else's fence, and there's been a very public accusation involving someone's daughter, a drinking horn, and an extremely offensive insult to someone's beard. It's time for the thing. Not a thing. The thing. The official Norse assembly where all matters of law, dispute, insult, murder, theft, marriage, land rights, and unfortunate haircuts are sorted out, publicly, loudly, and often with an air of theatrical resentment. The thing is less like a courtroom and more like a dramatic outdoor festival with an agenda. It takes place on a flat bit of land, usually windy, always muddy, where the free men of the region gather to shout, argue, swear oaths, and occasionally resolve something. It's a form of proto-democracy, if democracy involved more yelling and fewer chairs. There's no judge in a powdered wig, no tidy clerks. Instead, there's the law speaker, a person chosen for their exceptional memory. Why memory? Because all the laws are oral. That's right, no books, no scrolls, no handy Section B, Paragraph 3 to consult. Just one poor man standing in the middle of the circle reciting years of laws from memory, while others interrupt him with questions like, but what if the goat was already sick when it was stolen? And does the insult count if it was said during a feast? Laws in Norse society are less about good and evil and more about balance, and the glue that holds it all together is a concept called vergild, the man price. Every person has a value, not metaphorically, literally. You. Maybe your life is worth 200 silver coins. Your neighbour, being a slightly wealthier farmer with better sheep, 400 coins. The local chieftain's cousin, significantly more. That sullen guy who lives by the river and talks to ducks, he's valued less. Not officially, but you can tell. If someone is killed, maimed, or insulted, and in Norse culture, words can wound deeply, vergild is paid. It's meant to stop blood feuds before they turn into full-on family sagas. He took my brother's life becomes, he took my brother's life, but paid enough silver to cover 2 cows and a feast, so we're mostly okay now. Of course, if no payment is made, or if someone refuses to acknowledge the offense, the options broaden unpleasantly. You could challenge them to a duel, a holmgang, fought on a small patch of land, with rules, witnesses, and at least one person hoping it gets rained out. Or the offender might be outlawed, banished from the community, stripped of protection. Suddenly, they're fair game, literally, like deer or rogue turnips. But not every dispute is dramatic. Most are petty, familiar, and somehow still urgent. She stole my comb. He accused me of witchcraft because I grow good onions. His pigs wandered into my shed again, and now my cow won't sleep. You bring your witnesses. You stand in the middle of the gathered crowd. You speak your truth while everyone else watches and mumbles and tries to remember if this was the case with the chicken last month, or a new incident entirely. And when the law speaker has had enough, and the elders nod with appropriate sagacity, a decision is made. Sometimes it's silver. Sometimes it's exile. Sometimes it's just a very stern speech followed by a sheepish apology and awkward silence. Still, the process matters. Even if you don't like the outcome, you've been heard. Your case has been weighed in the great, slightly muddy scale of Norse justice. There are no lawyers, just oaths. Oaths are sacred. You don't make them lightly. When you swear an oath, whether it's about land, loyalty, or promising not to throw axes at the neighbors again, you do so in the presence of the gods. And the gods are always listening, especially Odin. He's very interested in broken promises, so you swear on your arm ring, or on Thor's hammer, or on the stone by the river that hasn't moved since your grandfather's day. You speak your truth. You hope your voice doesn't crack. You glance at the sky, just in case a raven's watching. And then, the thing is over. Everyone packs up their furs and their grudges and shuffles home. The decisions echo through the village for weeks. Someone's still muttering about the ox cart incident. Someone else is polishing their sword a little too pointedly. But for now, the law has spoken. Justice in the Norse world isn't swift or perfect. It's loud, it's personal, and it's deeply bound up with community, memory, and the idea that even in a land of snow and sagas, order must be maintained. If only so people don't start setting each other's longhouses on fire over fishing rights. So you walk home from the thing. Your feet are cold, your ears are ringing, and someone threw a bit of dried turnip at your back during the debate. But overall, you survived it. The stars are out now, clear and sharp, scattered like runes across the dark velvet of the sky. A sliver of moonlight glows behind the mountains. You see a figure in the distance, an old man lighting a candle at a shrine, mumbling to himself, asking for luck. Because laws are one thing, but real power, that belongs to the gods. And speaking of gods, the wind tonight is rising again, carrying strange smells and even stranger dreams. Let's follow it into the flickering world of faith and thunder, into a place where hammer-wielding deities wrestle with fate, and prayers are whispered between goat bleats and falling snow. There's more to the Norse life than ice and oaths. There are rituals, there are tales, there are gods who demand attention, loudly, hungrily, and not always kindly. Let's go find them. If you grew up with the idea that religion is a quiet affair full of incense, soft chanting, and maybe a gentle hymn about light and peace, then congratulations, you're not in Viking Age Scandinavia. Because in the Norse world, the gods don't whisper, they roar. Religion here is not a matter of polite faith. It's a full-contact spiritual experience. It smells like blood, sounds like yelling, and ends with someone passed out in a pile of goat skins next to a half-empty horn of ale. It is, like everything else in Viking life, loud, uncomfortable, and slightly sticky. Let's start with the basics. The Norse pantheon is like a rowdy family dinner where every uncle is armed, no one gets along, and someone is probably plotting the end of the world. Odin is the All-Father, the king of the gods, the god of wisdom, war, and questionable life decisions. He sacrificed an eye for knowledge, which sounds noble, until you realize he also regularly sacrifices other people for insight. He doesn't really comfort you. He recruits you, preferably after you've died impressively. Then there's Thor, the god of thunder, whose hobbies include hammer throwing, giant smashing, and being deeply offended by everything. If there's a storm rolling in, it's not just weather, it's Thor having a mood. He's the deity you shout to when things go wrong and you need someone to punch the sky until it listens. And of course, there's Loki. Loki is, well, Loki. Part trickster, part chaos incarnate. He's the reason your goat disappeared, your brother's hair turned into gold, and the feast ended with fire. He's clever, cunning, and not to be trusted, but somehow he's still invited to everything. He is the god of that moment when you know something is about to go terribly wrong, but you go ahead with it anyway. These gods aren't distant figures of celestial love. They walk among mortals, sleep with giants, argue about poetry, and occasionally turn into animals for reasons best not explained. They're immortal, yes, but not above drama. In fact, they thrive on it. So how do mortals worship them? With enthusiasm and livestock. A Norse religious ceremony isn't a quiet kneel. It's a blot, a ritual that begins with gathering the community and ends with someone covered in pig blood. Animals are sacrificed, goats, boars, horses, and occasionally someone more human-shaped if things are really desperate. The blood is caught in a bowl, then splashed on people, buildings, and altars using a bundle of twigs. If that sounds messy, that's because it is. The gods demand attention, and subtlety is not their love language. There's ale, of course, and food, and shouting, lots of shouting. You raise your cup to Odin for wisdom, to Thor for strength, to Freya for a good harvest, and to Frigg for peace. Though peace is often in short supply, you sing songs older than memory and make oaths that probably won't age well. And if you're lucky, the gods will accept your offering and keep the frost giants at bay. If not, well, hope you didn't really like that cow. Religion also weaves its way into daily life. Every home has a little altar, a carved figure, or at least a sacred stone where offerings of bread, milk, or coins might be left. You might whisper to the land spirits before crossing a hill, or toss a token into a stream before traveling. Even eating could be sacred. The first bite of a feast might be set aside for the gods. Or, if you're in a rush, for the dog that everyone insists is part divine anyway. The gods aren't fair. They're not even consistent. They don't promise happiness, just the chance to prove your worth. If you die well, you might end up in Valhalla, feasting in Odin's hall, waiting for the final battle of Ragnarok. If you die poorly, say from slipping on ice while carrying turnips, you might not be invited at all. It's a transactional relationship. You give blood, oaths, and reverence. The gods give you a slightly lower chance of disaster. Maybe. Some try to earn divine favor with carved runes, casting bones, or tying knots for luck. Others carry amulets, little Thor's hammers worn around the neck to ward off evil and frostbite. And if your crops fail or your child falls ill, you can always blame Loki. That's kind of his thing. Still, belief is powerful. On the coldest nights, when even the longhouse fire can't chase away the wind, people gather and tell stories. Tales of giants and gods, of brave mortals and doomed heroes. These aren't bedtime stories. They're warnings. They're hopes. They're reminders that even in a world of snow and shadow, there are forces greater than yourself. And they are watching. It's a chaotic, messy, bloody faith. But it's yours. And in the quiet hours after the rituals end, when the last torch guttered out and the hall smells of old beer and pine smoke, you might just feel the gods near, in the creak of the timbers, the howl of the wind, and the thunder that rattles your bones more than your walls. So you turn in for the night, still slightly sticky with goat blood, your ears ringing from oaths shouted into the sky. You lie down beside your kin, hoping Odin was impressed by your shouting and that Thor doesn't send hail again. And nearby, a child whimpers from a bad dream. A mother soothes with an old lullaby, half prayer, half memory, because the gods may be loud, but they don't quiet the fears of the young. So now, let's step gently into the world of those small voices, the children of the North. No soft cribs, no toy chests, just wooden dolls, scraped knees, and the never-ending chorus of "Don't touch that, it's cursed." Life as a Norse child wasn't easy, but it was full of noise, wonder, and a few splinters. Let's go meet them. In the land of long winters and longer chores, childhood is not a time of gentle lullabies and finger painting. It's more like a short internship in survival, supervised by a goat and occasionally interrupted by shouting. If you're born in a Viking longhouse, your entry into the world is about as glamorous as you'd expect. Probably cold, definitely loud, and assisted by a woman who's also stirring porridge with the same hand. The baby is swaddled in old wool and quickly introduced to the sounds of coughing elders, screaming toddlers, and the constant rustle of straw that is never as clean as anyone pretends. Childhood, as a concept, is a little different here. It's less of a magical phase and more of a countdown to being useful. By the time you're walking, you're working. And if you're not walking by then, someone might just start assigning you chores anyway. Viking children are expected to mimic adults from the very start, which explains why your favorite toy is a stick that vaguely resembles a sword, and your least favorite is the splinter it gave you. Toys, if they exist at all, are made from leftover bones, carved wood, or that one really round rock that looks kind of like a bear. You might have a tiny wooden horse, or a figure of a god with one eye and too many sharp angles. If your father's in a generous mood, he might help you carve a boat. If he's in a realistic mood, he'll hand you a shovel instead. Playtime is a loose term. Children do play, but often while pretending to be warriors, raiders, or gods. The problem is they're usually copying from the bloodier sagas. So what starts as a game of Thor and the Frost Giants ends with someone bruised, someone crying, and someone being told to stop using the firewood as a spear. Again, education is informal and mostly yelled. There are no schools, no chalkboards, and definitely no story time, unless you count the part of dinner when your grandfather shouts about the time he saw a troll. You learn by doing, by watching, by failing, and trying not to fail too many times in front of your mother. And while you're learning how to herd goats, gather firewood, and keep the family chickens from plotting their next escape, your teeth are already betraying you. There are no toothbrushes, no minty mornings. You chew on a twig or rinse with cold water and hope the gods are lenient with your molars. Toothaches arrive early, and they stay like unwanted house guests. If your tooth gets bad enough, someone might try to pull it with a pair of tongs. Good luck with that. Illness is constant. Children are fragile in a place that's anything but. A cold could turn into something worse. An infected cut could change everything. And still, the chores go on. You can be sick, but not too sick. If you can stand, you can fetch. If you can grip a bucket, you can help. And if you can't, well, better stay quiet and not bother the grown-ups too much. There's love, of course. Families are close, physically and emotionally. You sleep together, eat together, survive together. A mother will tuck you into a smoky bed of furs. A father might carve your name into a shield. But affection is often quiet, practical. A nod, a crust of better bread, a bare amulet strung with sinew and hope. Laughter exists here too, soft and sudden. A game of snow throwing that turns into giggles. A child's tale about Loki's underwear, delivered with all the dramatic flair of a skald in training. But it's a different kind of childhood. Not less valuable, just less padded. And there are the stories. Always the stories. The ones about gods who turn into birds. About giants who hate the sun. About warriors who battle bravely and feast forever. These stories wrap around children like cloaks. Part myth, part memory, part warning. In the dim corner of the longhouse, a child holds a wooden sword. The blade is crooked, the grip is splintered, but the stance is proud. Tomorrow they'll carry water. Next year they might fish. One day perhaps they'll row, or raid, or die young, like so many. For now they play, and that's enough. And as the fire crackles low and the snow thickens outside, we step from the small feet of youth into the full weight of winter. Not the charming kind with sleigh bells and snowmen. No. The Norse winter is the real kind, the hard kind, the kind with empty cupboards, sick bellies, and long, dark silence. because now comes the cruelest season of all. Let's step softly into it, the coldest chapter. Message 12 awaits. The wind outside howls with the voice of ancient wolves, and the snow comes sideways, like it's in a bad mood. Welcome to the very middle of a Norse winter, the time when even the bravest stop pretending this is cozy, and everyone quietly agrees that everything hurts. You don't count the days anymore. You count the firewood. You count the dried fish. You count the days since someone last smiled. The longhouse is cold no matter how many furs you pile on top of yourself. The smoke from the hearth clings to the rafters and your lungs, and the air is full of coughing. Not the polite kind, but the deep, barked misery of winter fevers settling in like uninvited relatives. You hear it at night, in the darkness between snores and the creaking of settling beams. Someone's got a fever. Someone else twisted an ankle on the icy path. And somewhere nearby, someone is pretending their cough doesn't matter because there's nothing to be done about it anyway. The food is, well, it's there. Mostly. You portion out the dried fish with a precision that would impress the gods. Every flake of barley counts. Every crumb of bread is a victory. The turnips are soft, the onions are shriveled, and the stew has been watered down so many times, it's thinking of changing careers. You scrape the bottom of the pot and pretend the blackened bits are flavor. You eat slowly, not because you're savoring it, but because you're trying to trick your stomach into thinking it's full. No one is full. And the darkness is a creature all its own. The sun rises late and sets before you've finished your second chore. For most of the day, the world exists in shades of blue and grey, like it's holding its breath. The longhouse glows faintly with torchlight and embers, but outside the sky hangs heavy. You light candles you can't afford to replace, and you mumble prayers you're not sure are being heard. The gods, after all, seem to be in hibernation, or sulking. Dreams get strange this time of year. People start talking about shadows moving where shadows shouldn't be. Elders whisper about the thinness of the world, how the veil between things becomes more like gauze in deep winter. Someone saw a raven circling counterclockwise. Someone else had a dream of a wolf with a woman's face. You don't talk about it during the day. But at night, when the wind cries and the fire dims, you listen. And maybe you leave an extra offering on the shrine, just in case. Tempers fray as fast as rope left in snow. One misplaced word, one dropped pot, one sigh too loud, and suddenly there's shouting in the longhouse. Families quarrel in low, bitter tones. Children get snapped at. Even the goats get side-eyed with suspicion. The cold wears you down. The hunger makes you sharp. And sometimes people just need to yell to feel like they exist. The sickness doesn't ask permission. It takes the strong, the young, the old. There's no real defense. No medicine beyond herbs, hope, and hot broth. You wrap a woolen scarf around your mouth. You keep the fire going, and you hope it passes you by. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it doesn't. And yet, life goes on. Chores still need doing. The animals still need feeding, even if they look at you like they've lost their will to moo. The snow needs clearing from the path, because you've already slipped twice and bruised things you can't pronounce. You pull your cloak tighter. You pray the thaw comes early this year, even though it never does. Still, in all this, there is a kind of beauty. The quiet. The way the snow settles on the roof like a blanket, even if it's a freezing one. The stars that pierce the night sky like tiny silver gods who never write back. The silence when everyone is finally asleep, when the fire crackles low and no one is coughing. And for just a moment, it feels like peace. It won't last. Morning always comes too soon. The chores return. The cold stays. The hunger whispers. But you're still here. That counts for something. And as the fire is stoked one more time, and the snow continues to fall like a punishment and a promise, we turn now to the quiet strength that has held these homes together all this time. Not with swords or sagas, but with hands cracked from work and voices too tired to complain. Let's step into the world of Norse women, strong, silent, and sore. In the Norse world, when people spoke of strength, they often meant muscle, swords, war cries echoing across fjords. But the truest strength, the kind that didn't make it into the sagas, lived quietly inside the longhouse. It churned butter, it spun wool until the fingertips bled. It birthed children with no midwife and buried them just as silently. That strength had a name: women. Norse women were not idle figures in the background of legend. They were the foundation holding everything up, while everyone else played hero. When the men were away raiding or dying or arguing over goats and gods, the women stayed. And in staying, they worked. And in working, they ruled, quietly, steadily, and with no time to rest. You rise before the sun, which in winter is a bit of a cheat because the sun barely rises anyway. But your day begins in darkness just the same. There's bread to bake, goats to check, and wool to spin. The loom waits for you like an unfinished promise. You carry water in buckets that slam against your knees and threaten to spill with every step. If the roof leaks, you patch it. If the children cry, you hush them. If your husband is home, you feed him. If he's not, you do all the above and manage the farm alone. Spinning wool is not romantic. It's repetitive, endless, and necessary. Without it, there are no clothes, no blankets, nothing to trade. Your fingers are always rough, your back always sore, but the spindle spins and the thread stretches and you keep going because no one else will. Marriage isn't about love. It's about land, security, and survival. Sometimes it works out. Sometimes it's just a polite cold war fought over stew and sleeping furs. Widowhood is a frequent visitor. Men die young, at sea, in war, or from being extremely bad at not falling off things. When you're widowed, you grieve, briefly, and then you remarry because there's still a farm to run and children to raise. Love is optional. Laundry is not. Giving birth is something you do in a corner with a blanket for privacy and a prayer for mercy. There is no doctor, no soothing midwife with warm hands and gentle encouragement. There is pain, silence, and whatever support the gods choose to offer that day, usually not much. If the child lives, there's rejoicing. If they don't, there's a quiet mourning, quickly buried beneath more chores. Some women do wield power. The lady of a wealthy household commands respect. Shield maidens exist, rare, fierce, and the subject of fireside awe. But for most women, strength is measured not in battles fought, but in burdens carried. You make decisions, manage stores, scold children, and balance the endless needs of the home. You are, in every sense, the chieftain of domestic survival. You know the laws too. In Norse society, women had more rights than in many other cultures. You could own property, inherit land, and demand a divorce. But rights don't feed goats, and the law doesn't always protect you when the menfolk are in a mood or a mead-fueled quarrel. So you choose your words carefully and move through your world with the quiet force of someone who doesn't have time for nonsense. You sing sometimes. Old songs, soft and strange, passed down through generations. Songs to keep rhythm while weaving. Songs to lull a sick child. Songs you don't fully understand, but sing anyway, because they feel like memory. There is a sadness in them, and a stubborn hope. Even in grief, you're expected to keep going. If your child dies, the fire still needs tending. If your husband falls in battle, someone still has to feed the pigs. Crying is done alone, if at all. And when it's done, you stir the stew and adjust the furs and ask if the roof needs patching again. You may not be in the sagas. No one sings of the woman who repaired the roof in the rain, or who taught 5 children to sew while kneading bread with her elbows. But without you, there would be no stories. The heroes would return to cold hearths and empty cupboards. The longhouses would rot. The legacy of the North would crumble. And you, bent, busy, strong as woven wool, you endure. But even the strongest must eventually rest. Now the fire crackles low. The goats are quiet. The children are asleep. And outside, the northern lights ripple like forgotten dreams across the sky. The end of life draws close for all, even in the land of long winters. Let us follow now into the quiet beyond strength, to the burial mounds, the burning boats, and the final rites of those who survived the sagas only to meet the snow one last time. In the Norse world, Death is never far. It crouches by the hearth in winter, lingers in the cold breath of livestock, and waits patiently in every cough that doesn't go away. Life here is a gamble, and the odds are rarely good. Most don't grow old. Many don't grow up. And when death finally arrives, there is no surprise, only preparation. For the ordinary Norse soul, death is not a glorious ending with music and banners. It is quiet, often cold, and always expected. The body stills, and the work goes on. But first, there are rites to be done. If there's time, if there's family, if there's enough wood that isn't already being used to patch the longhouse or cook the last of the dried turnips. If you're someone of status, your death might come with ceremony. A mound will be raised over your body, packed with stones and soil, marked for memory. Your goods will be buried with you. A sword if you owned one, a brooch, a comb, a few beads. These grave goods are not decorations. They are tools for the afterlife. You do not enter the next world empty-handed, at least in theory. In rarer, wealthier cases, a boat burial might take place. The body is laid in a ship or a boat-shaped grave. Surrounding it are treasures, weapons, food, furs, perhaps even sacrificed animals or servants, though that practice, grim and controversial, becomes less common over time. The ship may be burned, its flames licking at the cold sky, a bright farewell before the ash settles back to earth. But that's not how most people go. Most are buried simply. A cloth shroud, perhaps, a shallow grave near the edge of the field or forest. The mourners, if they have the time to mourn, speak soft words, or none at all. The earth takes you quickly, and within days life forgets the rhythm of your breath and fills it with chores. The Norse believed in several afterlives. Valhalla was the most famous, the Golden Hall of Odin, where warriors who died gloriously would drink and fight forever. But it was invitation only, and Odin had a very selective guest list. Most people didn't expect to go there. It was more aspiration than destination. Others hoped for Folkvanga, the field ruled by the goddess Freyja, another resting place for warriors. Again, not a guarantee. Then there was hell, not the fire and brimstone of later traditions, but a cold, misty realm ruled by a half-dead goddess. It wasn't punishment, it was just where most ended up. Quiet, shadowed, a place for those who died of age, sickness, or unremarkable means. If you were a child, your passage might be swifter, softer, a lullaby sung as the snow fell. If you were a grandmother, you might die mid-stitch, your hands still full of wool, your final words a reminder to mind the fire. If you were a thrall, a slave, your death might be marked with relief or silence. You might not be buried with honors, or at all. The living carry your memory, for a while. Names echo around the hearth, stories told of your grandfather's axe, or your mother's sharp tongue. But time is hungry, and eventually, even the strongest name fades beneath the noise of storms, the crack of ice, and the needs of the present. The harshest funerals are in winter. The ground is frozen. Digging is agony. The wood is too wet to burn properly. Still, the rites must be done. A blessing, a word to the gods, a final piece of bread left by the body. Then back to the longhouse, where life demands attention. Hungry mouths, broken roofs, endless cold. You don't fear death exactly. You just hope it waits. Long enough to see the snow melt. Long enough to finish the tunic. Long enough to teach the child one more song. And when it comes, you don't fight. You sigh. You close your eyes. You rest. For the first time in years. There is no applause, no saga, no crowd. But the fire flickers, the wind howls, and far across the mountains, a raven circles once and vanishes. Now, with the ashes cooled and the stones settled, let's pause. Not for mourning, but for remembering. For all that was built in the silence, through frost and grief and stubborn breath. In the final part, we'll return, not to the hardship, but to the heart of those who bore it, the unnamed, uncelebrated souls who did not conquer the world, but endured it. So here we are, At the end of our long, cold day in the Viking north, the snow still falls outside. The wind still slips through the cracks in the longhouse walls. And the goats, probably, are still up to something in the corner. But for now, the fire burns low, the world softens, and sleep draws near. And as you lie there, warm and still, it's worth asking one last time. Would you have lasted? Truthfully, not a chance. You'd have cried before breakfast, slipped on the ice-hauling water, burnt your hand tending the fire, and probably offended a god or two without realizing it. Your feet would be blistered, your ears frostbitten, your belly constantly grumbling. For something less chewy than dried fish soaked in beer, you'd beg for central heating by midday, invent socks by dusk, and renounce raiding entirely by the time the lice came calling. But they did last. The people of the Norse world, the ordinary ones, the ones who never made it into sagas or statues. They rose each day into cold and darkness, into endless work and aching joints, into smoke-filled homes and perilous seasons. And they didn't just survive. They built things. They spun cloth and shaped wood, and taught their children to whisper the names of gods with awe and laughter. They chanted around fires. They carved runes. They held feasts when they could, and buried their dead when they must. The sagas we know, of mighty warriors, storm-tossed voyages, and gods hurling hammers across the sky. Those sagas only lived because someone stayed behind to keep the hearth burning. Because someone fished, someone wove, someone listened. The thunder of Thor might rattle mountains, but it was the daily thunder of chopping wood, stirring stew, and hammering nails that kept the Viking world alive. The longhouse wasn't just a shelter. It was a story. The walls held laughter and arguments, births and deaths, secrets whispered in the dark, and songs hummed under breath. It wasn't comfortable, but it was full of life, full of breath, full of the quiet kind of courage that doesn't wear a sword, just a patchy wool tunic and stubbornness. And yes, many died young, many lived hard, but even then they passed something on. Names, yes, traditions certainly, but more than that, endurance. The idea that even in a world ruled by ice and war and wildly temperamental gods, you keep going. You put your hands to the loom, or the plough, or the cradle, and you carry the weight. So now, as you lie in your warm bed, with your soft pillow and your roof that doesn't leak, probably, take a moment to feel the echo of those lives. Not to feel guilt, but to feel wonder. Because the past wasn't glorious. It was hard, and yet it still gave us songs, stories, runes etched into stone, and recipes that involve way too much pickled fish. And now, let the longhouse settle. Let the fire dim. The goats have finally stopped complaining. The wind can hum outside without demanding your attention. And the gods, even Loki, have gone quiet. You're not on a frozen fjord. You're here. You're safe. You're warm. And the ice can wait while you drift away.